with this, I would like to lead to our last question of the day. How, in your opinion, because this is also something that interests you a lot, how are business innovation and culture related? I mean, we talked about it a little bit, but also how is leadership impacted because of culture? So these things is something, this is the really interesting, as you said, this is the basis, right, for business. So what do you think?
Wow, that's a pretty loaded question for a final question. So here are a couple of my thoughts, right?
Yeah.
On leadership. You can look at, for example, maybe I'm thinking, okay, my one of my idols obviously is Steve Jobs, right? But he's almost like a cult figure. I don't think he's the perfect manager or the perfect leader, but it's interesting how Steve Jobs, who didn't know anything about computers, didn't have any background in entrepreneurship, started a garage, but because of his background, really invented the whole graphical user interface and really put design as paramount. They say that if it were not for Steve Jobs, maybe you're too young to know this, we will still all have beige colored computers. But he really pushed the design on the desktop, right? And now you can see it on the other products. But when you talk about leaders, for example, and leadership, so one of the things about Chinese business innovation, and again that goes down to culture, is the idea that family, right? There's a big emphasis on filial piety. I'm not saying that China, if it were a public company under, a Chinese leader would not lay off 10,000 people, so it looks good on the books, right? I have no idea. But the reality is the systems are different. The environment is different. But one of the things that the Chinese really do well is the leader, from a leadership perspective, they treat everyone as family. And I know that has both good and bad ramifications. But when I say family, for example, one of the things that I read about this, a Chinese leader does is they recruit, it's a big chain furniture company. And what the CEO does is he recruits young people to do sales, 18, 19. And what he does is actually he puts them on a track, to become, business unit leaders by 21 years old, So consciously, they've made a determination that, this person has the good qualities and I'll put him on a track, in 2 to 3 years, I would like him to lead a business unit. I don't think that happens in the US. You don't hire a college graduate and say, wow, this guy is, doing very well, or this woman is really outstanding. I'll put her on a track. No, there's no track. You get your salary, maybe if it's you get a bonus, or whatever, and that's it. But there's no real career or succession planning in place. There's a company here in New Jersey that's led by a Chinese from Taiwan, and it's called Box, right? And his philosophy is that to treat your employees like they're your parents. So well, because of that, his attrition is very low, right? When you treat your employee, I mean, obviously he started at a small company, but now they're a company of about 5,000. So everyone is family. I think what I'm trying to say is that, unfortunately, the thinking around people and talent in the US is a little bit behind, because for the most part, we think of people as commodities, right? They're a cost center. You're costing me in my business. And therefore, as a commodity, you're a line item on my spreadsheet. And if the business is not doing well, so be it, right? Out you go. And speaking of innovation, unfortunately, he died. Tony Hsieh, I don't know if you remember him, he started Zappos, right? Zappos started out an e-commerce site selling shoes. And even back then, Jeff Bezos would Amazon is already around, right? But guess what? Zappos is the first ever e-commerce company that allowed free returns. Before that, even Amazon said, you want to return that? We're going to have to charge you for shipping. But Tony said, you know what? No, I mean, how can you figure out if the shoes fit right if you're buying it on a computer screen?
Yeah.
So let's make it returns free. And because of that, and again, that kind of thinking, very people-centric thinking, putting people in the center. Because of that, Jeff Bezos bought Zappos, and he copied that idea of free returns.
Yeah.
In fact, the whole Prime membership thing was again something that was borrowed from China. I don't know if it's Alibaba or Alipay, but the whole idea of Prime membership and not just a subscription, but sort of a VIP model was a Chinese invention.
Yeah.
So from a leadership perspective, I think that's one of the key things. But the second is, I think the real reason that China is innovative is because of its population, right? I'm not talking about the billions of Chinese, but they have a market that's available to them at their disposal. And I think this market is so, they call it, the people there are so adaptive and adaptive, meaning if there's new technology, they adopt it right away, they use it. And they're very adaptive in the sense that they change their way of living to accommodate new technology. Whereas here, not so much, right? So for example, the whole idea of mobile payment in China had an amazing traction. In China, you can go to a store and pay with your phone, with Alipay, right? But here, about 5-10 years ago, it was very hard. And even up to now, it's still hard to pay with your phone because there are competing, standards or applications. But yeah, no, that's I think the compared to the American population versus the Chinese population, that the Chinese are very adaptive and very adaptive. They've gone through a lot of change, obviously, and that's made them resilient and very flexible, and especially flexible in terms of welcoming new technology. I mean, I hear that Amazon, in China, Amazon is already delivering packages by drones.
Yeah. Yeah.
We still don't have that here. Yeah, we still don't have that
service as well. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. In the US, it's still not available. Why? Because we still don't have government regulation and how to accommodate drones in terms of the zone and their fly zone and all that stuff. And that would take 5-10 years. Yeah. So, in a way, I guess it's if it's state or sponsored innovation, or at least paving the way for innovation so that the government doesn't get in the way, which, by the way, is what American entrepreneurs and business leaders want, is for government to get out of the way. But in China, they do one more step. Government gets in the way, but they also build the infrastructure for businesses to flourish.
Yeah, exactly. That is really well put. And also this, maybe coming back to what we said at the beginning, this different perception of long-term thinking, right? So including the government, including the population, including also your employees, for example, will help them foster a more sustainable ecosphere versus, I don't know about the US, but I know that in the European Union, so many people quit their job during COVID. There was a huge surge of people who said that actually we are super unsatisfied with our work situation. We're not taking into consideration and we will quit, right? So this is something I think if you pay attention to your employees and if you enable them a good career track, for example, just as you pointed out, that could be more sustainable in the long term for a company, right?
Well, yes, you're absolutely right. And like I said, I'm not a big fan of the fact that most business leaders here view people as commodities, right?
Yeah.
We've had, like I said, in the 80s, at the height of outsourcing, CEOs were firing employees by thousands.
Yeah.
Because they're cost centers, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think that's, sustainable, or forget sustainable. I don't think that's humane. You don't treat people as commodities, and I think this idea of scaling, and having and being successful in 2 to 3 years and getting a valuation of 0 to 1 billion as a startup, being a unicorn is, it's just a little crazy. And by the way, that's another topic, which is interesting because many many observers view the Silicon Valley culture as not being the most ideal to start a business.
Okay.
And in fact, I think I don't know, have you heard, for a while that China has kind of is still regulating, big startup companies, their own unicorn companies,
Yeah.
like Alibaba and stuff, right? In fact, some Chinese companies lost a lot in the last few months. You heard about that,
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
And I think what the Chinese leadership are seeing is like, guys, we don't want you startups to follow the US model of startups. Because what we are doing here is that we've used technology to create more inequality.
Yeah.
Right? So yes, we have unicorns, we have the Ubers, which has its own issues with drivers. We have Airbnbs and everything is on the phone, but at the same time, what has been the really net effect on society, right? It's been this inequality. And I think the Chinese leadership see that very, very well and said, hold on a second, guys, you know what, calm down. Let's take a look at this, and we don't want to end up like that. So I think that makes sense, because at the end of the day, when you produce billionaires like Jack Ma, for example, you want to lift the rest of society, as opposed to what's happening in the US, which is we produce billionaires, trillionaires, which is crazy, by the way, and yet we have homeless people here, living in tents under bridges, like it's a third world country. To me, that doesn't compute. How is that possible that we can have an Elon Musk who could buy a country, Jeff Bezos, who could buy a banana republic, and yet we have people who are living in tents in the middle of winter. So
not even people who live in tents in the middle of winter. A normal medium income family couldn't afford a family member to have cancer. I mean, we are not even talking about the poorest of the poor. We are talking about a huge inequality in the middle of the US society. So I totally agree.
That is, you're absolutely correct. And it doesn't make sense. And on the other hand, it does make sense because of the way we designed our system, the way we designed our environment. So, and again, it goes back to culture. Asians and Chinese, we're all about groupthink, there's not so much about individual. And again, I would say that the reason America is successful for the past 200 years is this cultural psyche called rugged individualism, right? I alone will make myself successful. Everybody get out of the way, and I think it has, again, culture has its traditions in history, because this country in the beginning, it's a big country, right? And it was sparsely populated, especially the West, and you really had to go, build yourself up, when there was nothing there. And I think that's the kind of attitude and culture where, I alone will make myself successful, get out of the way. Whereas in Asia or China, it's like Jack Ma started Alibaba with 18 people. Some of them were former students. And Jack Ma he's an interesting guy. Did you know that he when he was in China, he applied for a job? Oh, he applied at KFC when KFC went to China. Right.
No, I didn't know that. Okay.
So there were 23 applicants. All 22 were accepted by AFC, but Jack Ma said he was rejected. He was told, "You're no good."
Okay, good to know. Jesus.
Okay, here's another one from Jack Ma. He applied to Harvard Business School 10 times.
No.
And got rejected every time.
I love to see how I mean, for me, this is inspirational, and this is, I think, a good end of the conversation. I mean, I would like to go on forever. We should do a second session, but it's a good ending because it's very inspirational to see that maybe it's just not the right place, just not the right time, and it doesn't have to do with the talent of somebody or with the strength of somebody. But so many people who didn't make it in the US went to China or to Asia and became super successful, or the other way around. And this leads back to culture, innovation, leadership, development, and so on. All are linked together. And thank you very much for your insights. It was really, really interesting. I don't want to end the conversation actually, but I know that you have to go. Is there anything else you would like to add, Ken?
No, I just want to say thank you for this opportunity to chat with you. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and believe me, you know, this is something that I'm very passionate about, and I feel like I've only scratched the surface. You
Yes.
know? And so no, I mean, which is great because then we can always look forward to another session.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to it. So thank you, Ken. Thank you very much for your insight, and see you for part 2, definitely.
Thank you, Amy. Take care now.
Great.